Joining us now is Senator Chris Dodd, Democrat from Connecticut. He is the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. Senator Dodd, thank you for your time. I'm very happy that you are very busy these days.
I'm getting very tired, too. It's been a long 5 days.
And I think it's probably going to be a long few more days.
Yes, you are. Right. You're absolutely right.
And let me ask you first about the way the president described the current crisis tonight. Do you agree with the president about why this crisis happened and what the contours of the crisis are?
Well, the president identified correctly it was the foreclosure crisis, the housing crisis. What the president left out, we don't need to dwell on this because we got to look ahead, but the president left out is the cops weren't on the beat. I mean, we had plenty of regulation in the area. The question was the regulators weren't doing their jobs. That is to go out and prohibit deceptive and fraudulent lending practices. Remember, the Wall Street Journal pointed out that 65% of the subprime mortgages that were worked out or were extended actually qualified for prime mortgages, a lot less costly than they had to be. So this was unscrupulous behavior, bad behavior that went unchecked for far too long. And secondly, and talking about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and clearly we need changes there, but Fannie and Freddie Mac bought very few of these subprime mortgages. So the problem going from subprime mortgages, predatory lending, to the situation we're in is a bit different. But look, there's no point tonight. We need to think ahead. Can we resolve this matter in front of us, put our country back on the right track? And there'll be plenty of time to go back and do the autopsy on how we ended up in this very tragic and sad moment when an administration for 8 years, in my view, didn't do their job. But now we need to say, what do we need to do in order to get a program in place to allow for our country and our economy to recover?
Well, let me connect those two ideas. The president did address the issue of regulation, what you describe as the cops not being on the beat. He essentially said there shouldn't be any update in regulation now. We should deal with that after the bailout. When you're considering this in the Senate, when Congress is considering his bailout plan, are you considering an effort to force the issue of re-regulating Wall Street into this bailout plan, or are you willing to consider it as a separate matter?
Well, it probably has to be done in the larger sense as a separate matter, only because it's so complex and will take a while. But there are things like the predatory lending bill, which we've drafted and marked up in the past, ought to be a part of something like this. I doubt we can get that, but clearly that needs to be done. The Federal Reserve Bank has promoted several regulations in this area, which are helpful, but it's a little like closing the barn door long after the problem has escaped. So there's some things we can do, but the majority of it will have to be focused on taxpayer protection, accountability in this bill, seeing to it that homeowners and foreclosure issues are going to be addressed, and dealing with executive compensation. I was pleased to hear the president at least identify those broad areas. Earlier this week, of course, none of those matters were included in the proposal he sent to the Congress. That's a quantum leap forward. That'll help, I think.
Because he's made those leaps forward, can you predict now that the bailout plan will pass the Congress? Do you think a plan will pass?
Well, I hope it will. Some plan will pass. But candidly, turning over $700 billion when we're going to have a change of administration in 40 days, basically, is something I'd like to see something done with this money that would require some check on this to determine whether or not this plan of theirs is working. I've talked to a lot of people on Wall Street who spent their careers there who have serious reservations about this particular proposal. Now, Congress ought not try to micromanage that, but I'm not convinced this plan is going to work, and a lot of people who are far more knowledgeable about the workings of these financial institutions are not either. So I'd like to be able to have some point here fairly quickly that we make a determination as to whether or not this proposal, if he's given the authority, will actually work.
On the issue of the prospects for this bailout, Senator McCain today, in suspending his presidential campaign and saying that he wanted to return to Washington, although we understand he's still in New York City tonight, he said, "I do not believe that the plan on the table will pass as it currently stands, and we are running out of time." When he says we are running out of time, do you agree with him, and do you think there is a call for him to ask for a suspension of the presidential campaign and a delay of the debate?
Well, look, I'd like to move quickly if we can on this as well. But Rachel, I'll tell you, speed is not the issue here, getting this right. This is the kind of decision, if not made well, made in a smart way, in a pragmatic and thoughtful way, could haunt us for decades to come. So I'm as anxious as anyone to get this done, but I'm not about to move this thing more quickly than I think is warranted, and I want to make sure, as to the extent you can, that we're doing the right thing. Now, I'm delighted that John is expressing himself on the issue. I've heard from Barack Obama on numerous occasions over the last number of days, calling. I know he's talked to Hank Paulson, And so he's been deeply involved and interested in how this is progressing. I've never heard from John McCain on the issue, so I'm delighted he's expressing some interest. And I'm a little concerned that while we're meeting, in fact, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate are sitting down to try and finalize some of these particular points. We had a long meeting today in the Democratic caucus in the Senate, and I'm just worried a little bit that sort of politicizing this problem, sort of, flying in here, I'm beginning to think this is more about a rescue plan for John McCain than a rescue plan for the economy. So we're going to meet tomorrow apparently at the White House late in the afternoon, but candidly, a lot of us have been working for 5 straight days around the clock, and I haven't heard a word from John McCain.
Senator Dodd, we're just hearing that your colleague, your cohort, I guess, in the House, Barney Frank, the head of the House Financial Committee, has just said that this plan will pass, presumably speaking for himself in the House. Is there a unified Democratic position on this plan? We know that there has been a lot of dissent and division within the Republican Party on the bailout issue. Are Democrats united?
Well, I can say we met today, and the plan that I proposed back several days ago has been universally endorsed by my Democratic colleagues. And it incorporates a lot of the principles, Rachel, we talked about here tonight. That is taxpayer protection, dealing with home ownership, the foreclosure issue, as well as accountability. And it's very important to point out here as well, beyond these issues, the American people want to know, what does this mean to me? I understand you're going to buy a lot of bad assets on Wall Street, but it's about retirement plans, 401ks, these whole issues of job creation, obviously college tuitions, all of these issues as well are at stake. And if in fact these problems are as serious as they are, then we ought to move forward. But I'm not about to move forward with a plan that I don't think is going to do the job or is going to give far too much power and resources to an administration that hasn't demonstrated yet to me they know what to do with it.
Senator Chris Dodd, chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.